Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out the world's greatest song that simply shouldn't exist. Before I push play on the video, I want to point out right here, this is the cover of Sgt. Pepper, and this little bundle of yellow flowers, it's supposed to look like an acoustic guitar, right? But if you cover up the second half of the guitar body, I'm doing that with my hand right now, maybe I'll do it in the video, it looks like it says Paul. And this was part of the Paul is Dead conspiracy. And if you zoom out, there's 4 wax figures of the Beatles, like mourning Paul's grave. It's creepy. Anyway, go ahead.
This is the Beatles' greatest ever songwriting idea, and I'm going to play through every take to show you how it was constructed over 5 days in 1967. Each take shows the incredible development of new ideas and hidden details as they turn a very simple idea into a creative masterpiece. It's the final track from the Sgt. Pepper album, an album that they're partway through recording when John has the beginning of a new idea. It was January...
Hang on, y'all be sure to go to David Hartley and like and subscribe. I love learning about the Beatles' creative process because I think a lot of people read into it and they think, oh, they thought of this thing, like what genius calculating mathematical mind created this beautiful piece of work. But they're so off the cuff with stuff. They're like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. No, let's don't do that. No, I like that. No, I like that. Oh, I have this. Da, 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 da. It's so quick and what's the word? Playful. It's playful. They're having fun. I don't know this whole story. I do know John wrote the first part, Paul wrote the other part, and then in the middle is the orchestra swell, and at the end. That's all I really know. Let's learn about this. Be sure to go to David Hartley.
They're partway through recording when John has the beginning of a new idea. It was January 17th, 1967, when John was reading that day's newspaper.
So it had 2 stories. One was the Guinness child had killed himself in a car. That was the main headline story. On the next page was about 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire.
John worked around this real-life inspiration and added fictional details filled with abstract and psychedelic ideas.
He also had an article framed on his wall at home that was about, well, it was an article. It was like an old advertisement for a circus, and that's where he got the idea for being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. So I think he did that a lot.
Almost immediately, John took the idea for A Day in the Life to Paul to help finish.
He kind of had the first verse, and this often happened. One of us would have a little bit of an idea, and instead of sitting down and sweating it, we just bring it to the other one.
Notably, John's initial idea is very short and simple, and unlike some other recent songs he's written like Strawberry Fields Forever and Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, A Day in the Life is relatively simple in that it doesn't change key or change time signatures, but that's what makes it so magical. Just 2 days later, on January 19th, John brought the song along to the studio for the first session. But even from the beginning, they encountered the first of many creative challenges recording the song. They had John's verses, beautifully written, but something would need to happen next, and John didn't know what to do.
Because when John first played it to me, as he did Strawberry Fields, just strumming away, and he said, Paul, have you got anything we can put in here? Paul said, not really. So I've got this song which I've been trying to get something out of. It doesn't go very far. And John said, that'll do.
And then we put another section I had, woke up, fell out of bed, tried to comb across my head.
Putting these 2 ideas together...
Wow, that'll do. That's so great. I love that. That'll do. And it's brilliant.
Woke up, fell out of bed, tried to comb across my head.
Putting these 2 ideas together would either be a complete mess of a medley or a stroke of genius. But with the structure of the song now in place, they began working on what was then known as In the Life Of.
You know, they also did something like that on Abbey Road with the medley. They had like little pieces of songs and they just put them all together and made one long song. I'm also realizing the serendipity of the fact that this is called A Day in the Life, or I guess In the Life Of, but both John's part of the song and Paul's part of the song are like about someone's day. John's is he read the news today. Paul's is he woke up, got out of bed. It's like his day. It's like it seemed like something that they would have thought of. Oh, let's have a middle part where I'm getting up out of bed and da 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 da. But he already had that part. And they're like, that'll do. Put that in there. I wonder if they realized the association at that time. You know, they must have.
That evening, they rehearsed and recorded the first takes of the song. The rehearsal of the song featured John on piano, Paul on Hammond organ, George on acoustic guitar, and Ringo on congas. These rehearsals were recorded, but later wiped.
Oh, okay. John on piano, George on acoustic guitar, Paul on... Okay, I guess that's what this picture is. Because I think... In the final version, I think John's playing the guitar, Paul is playing the piano, Ringo is still playing congas, but I think George plays maracas for some reason. Or maybe I that's always been in my head. I don't know. Different. Okay.
On congas. These rehearsals were recorded, but later wiped. Engineer Jeff Emmerich remembers, the song unveiled for us this evening was tentatively called In the Life Of, soon to be retitled A Day...
Sorry to stop the videos so soon, but that's a great book, Here, There, and Everywhere, by Jeff Emmerich. It's awesome.
Recorded, but later wiped. Engineer Jeff Emmerich remembers, the song unveiled for us this evening was tentatively called In the Life Of, soon to be retitled A Day in the Life. It was in a similar vein to Strawberry Fields Forever, light and dreamy, but it was somehow even more compelling. I was in awe. I distinctly remember thinking, Christ, John's topped himself. Recording A Day in the Life marked a significant step forward, in that for the first time, the Beatles began recording a song whilst it was still unfinished. Not just rehearsing ideas, but recording finished takes. So how would it be possible to join up these ideas if they didn't know what to put in the middle?
We connected them with a series of empty bars on either side of Paul's section before we came back into John's as a reprise. And we knew we had to fill those bars with something sensational. And we didn't know what it was going to be yet.
Obviously, more was needed to flesh it out, but this was all Lennon had written. There was a great deal of discussion about what to do, but no real resolution. Paul thought he might have something that would fit, but for the moment, everyone was keen to start recording. So it was decided simply to leave 24 empty bars in the middle as a kind of placeholder.
Interesting. That's a great idea, because, I mean, if they ended up just not keeping it, they could easily splice it out. No big deal. But I bet they felt comfortable doing this because with Strawberry Fields, they edited a couple different, maybe two different takes. Yeah, two different takes that were in different keys and different tempos, and they just changed the tape speed and cut them together, and it worked. So they probably felt like pretty free to do that sort of thing, you know? And hell, they got unlimited studio time. If it didn't work, they just re-record it, right?
With John giving a few instructions to people, as usual, just before he starts it.
In the life of. So,
have the mic on the piano quite low. There's just keeping it like maracas, you know.
They cut part of it. Y'all, they cut part of it out. I've heard this first take before. He says, keep the piano quite low. And then he goes, you know those old pianos. And then he counts it off by saying, Sugar Plum Fairy, Sugar Plum Fairy. But they cut that out. Why did they cut that out? You can hear the fairy just sort of at the end there.
Quite low. There's just keeping it like maracas, you know.
John is now playing guitar. Okay. It says at the bottom. Paul is on piano. Okay. And George is on maracas, I guess. George is on maracas. You can hear the full take on the Beatles Anthology #2. If you're interested, I think it's #2, maybe #3. I think it's #2, if you're interested.
They then build towards the middle section with Mal Evans counting the 24 bars.
1, 2, 4, 8, 9, Paul's playing random notes on the piano as a placeholder. Huh. Huh. Oh. Yeah, it's funny that he's playing random notes as a placeholder because that would fit in what eventually became the final version, the orchestra swell.
After recording Paul's section with no vocals, it then follows a very clever transitional section back into John's verse.
I love this part. It's a 5-bar chord progression. The chords provide a smooth modulation back to the original key. Right. Y'all, that's probably my favorite part of the song is that switch. The melody that I think Paul's singing over it. He's going, something like that. Pardon my singing. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love that part. Okay.
The take finished with Mal Evans counting out another 24 bars before an abrupt, uneventful ending.
6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. At this point, the Beatles don't know how to end the song. So it just abruptly ends.
So, that was take one. The structure...
Thank God they changed it, right? Thank God they added some other stuff. That would have been so lame.
So, that was take one. The structure is clearly there, but they had yet to overcome some of the most difficult creative problems. There were, however, a few ideas that happened by accident that would end up staying on the final track. Though Mal's voice was fed into the headphones, it was not meant to be recorded, but he got more and more excited as the count progressed, raising his voice louder and louder. As a result, it began bleeding through onto the other mics, so some of it even survived onto the final mix. There also happened to be a wind-up alarm clock set on top of the piano. Lennon had brought it in as a gag one day, saying that it would come in handy for waking up Ringo when he was needed for an overdub. In a fit of silliness, Mal decided to set it off at the start of the 24th bar. That too made it onto the finished recording. For no other reason than that I couldn't get rid of it.
Interesting, because that works with the woke up, fell out of bed part, right? I wonder if those lyrics, woke up, fell out of bed, came from the alarm clock. I wonder if they had the lyrics already. Interesting.
Next came take two, which is mostly unchanged other than one important addition at the end of the song.
Yeah, I've heard that before. There's, what is it, the 50th anniversary, 40th anniversary, 50th anniversary? When they remixed it a few years ago, they added that version. What is it, the 2017 mix? Oh, the deluxe version of the 2017 mix. You can actually hear it with that ending on it. Sounds like a good idea on paper, but in practice, not grand enough, right?
They recorded a further 2 takes in a similar style, and the final of these takes, take 4, was considered the best and would be worked on the following day. Day 1 was over, and when they returned to the studio the next day, the first task was to review the previous day's work. The next night's session began with an intensive review of what had been laid down on tape. Our job was to decide which of John's lead vocals was the keeper. Lennon sat behind the mixing console with George Martin and me picking out the bits he liked. Paul was up in the control room too, expressing his opinions, but George Harrison and Ringo stayed down in the studio. They just weren't involved to that extent. They then made 3 reduction mixes of take 4, labeled takes 5, 6, and 7, to cut the track count from 4 down to 2. After listening back, they chose take 6 as the best version and used it as the foundation for the next stage of work. With 2 tracks now available to use as overdubs, they attempted to record Paul's vocal for the first time.
Wow, I forget they only had 4 tracks, y'all. Man. You know what's interesting for that deluxe version, the 2017 remix I mentioned, I think they were able to go back to those original 4-track tapes where the original generation of the guitar, piano, and vocals and maracas and bongos, and sync those up with the other overdubs. So there's clarity from that resolution that is very nice. Very nice. Okay.
This take also contains Paul's bass and Ringo's drumming on the 4th track.
A lot of echo on his voice.
Both of these overdubs were...
He said the S word. Because he's saying everybody instead of somebody. Let's hear Paul curse again, y'all.
Both of these overdubs would later be re-recorded. John also double-tracked his vocals on this take. If you listen carefully, you can hear the double-track sound on I'd Love to Turn You On.
Having read the
As for the ending, well, they ditched the hummed ending chord for now, but were doubling down on this crazy chromatic high energy ending.
Wow.
Although this take was bounced down from a previous take, this is the first take we have where we hear anything that would make it onto the final song. 2 weeks went by without any work on A Day in the Life. But when they entered the studio on February 3rd, they spent the evening once again working on the song. The first task there was to replace Paul's guide vocal in the middle section, and he and I had a long discussion about that, which led to another sonic innovation. He explained that he wanted his voice to sound all muzzy, as if he had just woken up from a deep sleep and hadn't yet gotten his bearings, because that was what the lyric was trying to convey. My way of achieving that was to deliberately remove a lot of the treble from his voice and heavily compress it to make him sound muffled. When the song goes into the next section, the dreamy section that John sings, the full fidelity is restored. There was just one problem. John's vocal was finished and they were going to record Paul's vocal onto the same track. But just as Paul finishes his line, I went into a dream, it immediately goes into John's ah in the transition. This meant that if Paul was even slightly late in finishing his vocal, it would permanently be recorded on top of the start of John's voice. Richard was quite paranoid about it, with good reason, and I remember him asking me to get on the talkback mic to explain the situation to Paul, and ask him not to deviate from the phrasing that he had used on the guide vocal. The thought of having to do it again and recreate the atmosphere was daunting, not to mention what John's reaction would have been. Someone's head would have been bitten off and it most likely would have been mine. But Paul, ever professional, did heed the warning, and he made certain to end the last word distinctly in order to give Richard sufficient time to drop out before John's vocal came back in.
Somebody spoke and I went into a dream.
That's Paul singing. That's Paul singing the ah.
The 2 sections which featured mostly John and Paul were coming along nicely, but they still faced 3 very important questions. What kind of drumming would Ringo do? So far, drums and percussion were hardly present on the song. What would they use in the 24-bar section that was still only a placeholder? And how would they end the song? Paul suggested that Ringo not just do his...
Yo, I can't stop thinking about that. I'm pretty sure that's Paul singing the ah. Because I used to think it was John, but at some point I realized it was Paul. Let's listen again.
And I went into a dream.
The 2 sections which feature...
kind of does sound like... It sounds like Paul trying to sound like John.
The two sections which featured most...
While the ah or ah vocals in the Beatles' A Day in the Life have been debated for decades, most evidence points to Paul McCartney singing the main high-pitched vocal part, sometimes bolstered by or mixed with John Lennon. The vocal is often considered part of McCartney's middle section and resembles his singing style on other tracks. This video explains the debate over the ahs. Oh, yo, okay.
For over 50 years, there has been a debate raging about who is actually singing this part. Is it Paul McCartney? Or is it John Lennon? If you search this topic on the internet, you will find tons of threads and polls and comments about this debate. It's almost like the infamous dress meme from a few years ago, where people simply perceive totally different things, even if only one option is factually correct. And here, it does sound like it could be either Paul or John singing. It
does.
Here. So who is it? Thanks to the fact that this was recorded on multi-track tapes, we can actually listen to the isolated vocal part, which might be most revealing of all.
Okay.
Or not.
That sounds like Paul.
What makes it so hard to figure out is in part because of the vocal effects, in particular the heavy reverb, which was generated in Abbey Road's famous echo chamber, a physical room in which microphones and speakers were placed to bounce audio around and route it back to the mixing deck, where it could be added into a track. But back to the mystery of who's singing the ahs. Let's look to the evidence on both sides. On one hand, this is part of Paul's section of the song, in between John's verses and the two famous orchestral buildups. Some fans have gone as far as to analyze the multi-track tapes and compare Paul's vocals to other songs like Lovely Rita, or I Want to Tell You.
I've got
Okay.
On the other hand, though, there are parts of the section that sound very much like John's trademark, slightly nasal, slightly raspy vocal range, which you can hear clearly on songs like Mother from John's solo album Plastic Ono Band. To deepen the mystery, two very important Beatles-related engineers, Geoff Emerick, who was present during the Sgt. Pepper's sessions, and Giles Martin, son of George Martin and the lead producer of the Sgt. Pepper's Remix project in 2017, have both specifically claimed that John is singing the ahs. But what do you think? Does it sound more like John or more like...
Well, Geoff Emerick says it was John and they did the whole punch-out thing, so I guess I'm back to believing it's John, although it sounds like Paul. It really sounds like Paul to me. Okay, back to...
The two sections which featured mostly John and Paul were coming along nicely, but they still faced three very important questions. What kind of drumming would Ringo do? So far, drums and percussion were hardly present on the song. What would they use in the 24-bar section that was still only a placeholder? And how would they end the song? Paul suggested that Ringo not just do his normal turn, but really cut loose on the track, and I could see that the drummer was quite reticent. Come on, Paul, you know how much I hate flashy drumming, he complained. But with John and Paul coaching and egging him on, he did an overdub that was nothing short of spectacular.
It is good drumming.
Featuring a whole series of quirky tom-tom fills.
It's strange, but
Engineer
fits.
Geoff Emerick continues with sonic experimentation, just as he had done on Revolver. We were looking for a thicker, more tonal quality, so I suggested that Ringo tune his toms really low, making the skins really slack. And I also added a lot of low end at the mixing console. The result is that Ringo plays a subtle yet powerful beat filled with tom-tom fills.
Though the holes were rather small, they had to count them all. Now they know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall.
So that was Ringo's job sorted. The next question that still remained unanswered from the beginning was what could fill the 24-bar placeholder?
Sitar.
John had the idea of a sound that began really small and then gradually expanded into something huge. Picking up on the
Good
theme,
idea.
Paul excitedly suggesting employing a full symphony orchestra. George Martin liked the idea, but mindful of the cost, was adamant that there was no way he could justify charging EMI for a full 90-piece orchestra just to play 24 bars of music. It was Ringo, of all people, who came up with a solution. Well then, he joked, let's just hire half an orchestra and have them play it twice.
Yeah.
Although said as a joke, it was a genius idea.
Yeah.
But George Martin was still concerned about the cost of employing even half an orchestra for just 24 bars. But John, being the most decisive in the group, put his foot down and said, let's do it. The problem was that John's idea was too abstract for an orchestra. George Martin, being a classically trained musician, knew that you couldn't just tell an orchestra to make something that sounds like the end of the world.
Yeah.
And so he set about writing something that would fulfill John's abstract idea.
Y'all, I'm an audio engineer, if you didn't know that. And I have noticed the few times that I've done a session where like a cello player or violinist is brought in and you ask them to improvise or to play something that's not written down, they're kind of lost. They're so used to just playing what's written on a piece of paper. And it's crazy it's really impressive how some of these orchestral players will do that for like a movie soundtrack. They rehearse it one time and then they record it and that's it, and it sounds perfect. They're basically sight reading it as they're recording it, and it's perfect. It's amazing that they can do that. But on the other side of the coin, ask them to just make something up in the moment, and they're like, what? It's really tough for them. It's like a different part of the brain.
And so we set about writing something that would fulfill John's abstract idea. What I did there was to write, at the beginning of the 24 bars, the lowest possible note for each of the instruments in the orchestra. At the end of the 24 bars, I wrote the highest note each instrument could reach that was near a chord of E major.
Ah, so he wrote it on paper. Make them feel comfortable, like they know what to play now, right?
Paul pushed back and said, I think it would be great if we ask each member of the orchestra to play randomly. George Martin replied, the problem is that you can't ask classical musicians of that caliber to improvise and not follow a score. They'll simply have no idea what to do. John replied, well, if we put them in silly party hats and rubber noses, maybe then they'll understand what it is we want. That will loosen up those tight asses. What George Martin did so brilliantly throughout his work with the Beatles was to take these incredibly imaginative and abstract ideas, mostly by John and Paul, and find a way to realize that sound with the often very simple tools they had available. And the orchestra on A Day in the Life is a great example of this. The orchestra was booked to come in a week later, and George Martin wrote out the necessary parts for them to play. Before the session, Paul had another idea. As it was such a special event for an orchestra to be recording on a Beatles song, why not make that evening's session into something really special? Paul suggested that they should invite all their friends along to the session to turn it into a party, and they should all wear full evening dress. Everybody did, except for the 4 Beatles. They also took John's idea of bringing along silly costumes to try and lighten up the mood. With everything ready to go, the orchestra began recording the parts that George Martin had written out for them.
How fun.
The next problem to solve was doubling the orchestral sound, because of course they'd only booked half an orchestra. I ended up with the equivalent of not 1 but 2 full orchestras. After rehearsal, we recorded that sound 4 times, and I added those 4 separate recordings to each other at slightly different intervals. If you listen closely, you can hear the difference. They are not quite together. The same recording was used on the second 24-bar placeholder too. And with that, the whole song was in place, recorded and finished, apart from one chord, the final chord, maybe the most famous single chord in recorded history. Because for now, they still didn't know how it would end. After recording the orchestra, they spent time trying to record Paul's idea for the hummed chord. These were recorded as takes 8, 9, 10, and 11. With each take, you can hear Paul try and coach them into working together.
A Day in the Life. This is take 8, and it's the choir for the end. Choir? 8. Okay, 8 beats then. Just like count 8. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Singing the chord proved to have a number of difficulties. Firstly, they're not really singing a chord, they're all just singing the same note. But then, not only was it difficult to get everyone to start together, but to finish together as well. Which is why Paul is asking them to count to 8 in their head.
Take 9.
Do you like this?
1, 2, 3, 4.
By the time they get to the final take, take 11, they've definitely developed the sound a bit further.
1, 2, 3.
This is such a great insight into the creative process, because we can all listen to this and see that it's not the best that it can be. They're trying to make an idea work, and it's kind of there, but it just isn't really.
This was one of those bright ideas that just didn't work. We thought of all the ideas of Buddhist monks chanting. Thought it'd be a great idea to have everybody massed in the studio doing Om and multiply that many times. And the result was pathetic.
They returned to the studio on February 20th.
George Martin has a way of talking, doesn't he? It's sensational. The result was pathetic.
And the result was pathetic.
I could just imagine doing a take and hearing George Martin just answer back, pathetic. Do it again.
Pathetic.
They returned to the studio on February 20th for what would be the final session recording A Day in the Life, by which time Paul had another idea.
I was very into, if you listen on, if you stick a mic on that, that'll go on for about a minute and a half. Should we listen? No, we haven't got time.
Well, Paul, it's my video and I say that we do have time, so we can listen to all the different takes they made of the final chord. But of course, it wasn't enough to have just one person playing the piano. They wanted to create the biggest sound that they possibly could. They collected 3 different pianos, John, Paul, Ringo and Mal Evans, each playing the chord across the pianos.
George is sitting back here. George, get on a piano, man. Is he sulking? Is he pouting? So the only thing George played on this was maracas, I think. He was probably sulking. He's probably a little bummed about that.
Playing the chord across the pianos. George Harrison wasn't at this session, and George Martin is playing the chord on a harmonium. Unlike with the humming, they didn't have to worry about singing the right notes or everybody finishing together, but they still struggled to get everyone to start together perfectly. As the sound continues, Jeff Emerick turns up the faders as the chord continues to ring, so much so that you can hear the sounds of the studio.
Have you got your loud pedal down, Mal?
Which one's that?
The right hand one. Far right.
Go on.
Take 1. Alright, on 4. 1, 2, 3.
The chord needed everyone to start together perfectly, but it was proving more difficult than they might have liked.
1, 2, 3.
Mal's not a musician.
1, 2, 3. 5. 1, 2, 3.
Jeez.
I don't think we were together at the beginning of it, were we?
George Martin, who is also playing the chord, is keeping his producing ears on as he listens to check that everything is perfect.
1, 2, 3. 7.
Alright. 1, 2, 3.
Take 8.
By this point, they
that
might be
would've been good.
wondering if they're ever going to find the perfect take.
Try that. Just let it ring.
Finally, on take 9, they strike the perfect chord, which is the one used on the final mix.
Take 9.
That's it. Off and on. Yeah. Off. 1, 2, 3.
There's a buzzing. Your chair squeak.
The song was finally completed across a total of 34 hours of studio time. 2 days later, they mixed the mono version, and the following day, the stereo version. But the song was not finished yet, because there's one more secret. The book featured in this video is Jeff Emmerich's autobiography, and there's one more story from it that I want to share. Interestingly, a week after we did those mixes, which actually ended up being the masters used on the album, Paul decided that he wanted a different colour on the ending chord and overdubbed yet another piano, although it was ultimately deemed extraneous and was never used. The fact that they were willing to continue to work on the track even at that point showed how committed the Beatles were to perfection by this stage of their career, and how willing they were to break all the rules. The song had already been mixed to everyone's satisfaction, but that didn't mean that one of us couldn't still come up with an idea to try to improve it. No one rolled his eyes, and no one, not even John, said, "Bloody hell, we've already finished that song." The spirit throughout all the Pepper sessions was always, if you've got an idea, let's try it. And there is one final, almost hidden idea at the very end. Recorded 2 months later in April, long after the mix was finished, the Beatles decided to end the Sgt. Pepper album with a high-frequency tone that only dogs could hear, and a short loop of nonsense sound.
I mean, we had to have a bit of fun at the end of it, didn't we? So we just recorded a load of nonsense for 2 seconds, and I tucked it in on the little run-out groove. And then people thought there was something significant in it, so we had to have our little joke.
Yeah, on the record, I guess that run-out groove would keep repeating, like the needle would skip and just keep making that noise over and over. But on the CD release and streaming release now, it just repeats that and fades out, I guess, to mimic that. Y'all, that Here, There, and Everywhere book by Jeff Emmerich is really good. I probably need to reread it. There's so many good stories in there. I've forgotten a lot of it, but it's very good. Be sure to go to David Hartley and like and subscribe. What a fascinating, fascinating thing. I love that they were willing to do all that even after they had finished it. Someone must have rolled their eyes. If I was the engineer, I'd be like, God dang, Paul, it's done. It's done. But I guess he didn't. They're like, let's do it. I admire that. Y'all be sure to go to David Hartley and like and subscribe. I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. I'd like to thank Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, George Martin, Jeff Emmerich, Richard, the assistant engineer, whose last name I forgot, and David Hartley. Thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see y'all next time. Later.